Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm.
We're here today to protest Representative Murphy's vote for $61 billion in cuts in the recent House spending bill. So that bill, they cut 61. They were threatening 100 billion, but the vote was for 61 billion to cut. ABC reported that a study by Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs. Now, can everybody hear? Goldman Sachs, for its clients, that the House cuts would reduce the growth of the economy by 2% of gross domestic product, reinforcing the notion that austerity measures will hurt the economy and not help. Again, the Center for Budget Policy Priorities says that now is not the time for cutting spending, and that infusions of money to lessen the impact of the recession do not contribute in a meaningful way to the deficit, because those costs are short-lived. Employment needs to rebound before it's important to address the deficit, and employment is not predicted to rebound until about 2013. We need to grow the economy. So, for Pennsylvanians, the spending cuts included in that initial $100 billion were things like we would lose $12.6 million for school improvement in Pennsylvania. We'd lose more than $20 million from special education in the Commonwealth. There would be a loss of 313 potential college student residents of Pennsylvania would be deprived of receiving Pell Grants that would allow them to complete their college educations. Boo! Okay. So on top of cutting dozens of government programs that hundreds of millions of Americans rely on, the Washington Post recently reported that, according to a leading economist, the Republican budget proposal could actually cut 1 million jobs. It won't gain a job, we'll lose 1 million. And it's clear that Republicans aren't concerned about this. At a recent press conference, Republican House Speaker John Boehner told reporters that if some federal jobs were lost as a result of his proposed spending cuts, so be it. So, at a time when millions of Americans are struggling to make ends meet, it doesn't make sense to cut programs that working families depend on.
Thank you.
We all agree that balancing the budget is important, but to do so in the long term, we need to support economic growth. That growth needs to be shared by the other 98%. We need to continue our investment in the safety net for those who are vulnerable. We invest in infrastructure, invest in education, and support science and innovation to get the recovery going for all Americans, not just the top 2 or 1%.
For 30 years, I believed that if we all worked hard, did a good job, and were good employees, life would be okay. I have since lost my career, my house, and everything I've worked for as a direct result of unchecked corporations making decisions based on greed. After 9/11, my Verizon engineering job was dissolved, along with the contract held with U.S. Airways. Reemployment at Level 3 Communications lasted 2 years until Level 3 offshored all of their Pittsburgh jobs. There is a distorted belief that we have to keep giving more money to the rich while dismantling the only hope that many people have to feed their babies and educate their children. The rich are getting richer, the middle class is joining the ranks of the poor. Unless we, as human beings, step back and recognize the divisive nature of these tactics, our children will be born into true economic slavery.
These hardships don't fall on people because they didn't do the right thing. They did the right things. But there has not been the economy to allow workers to prosper. It's all gone to the top 1–2%.
I'm Bhavika Parody. I've been living in Pittsburgh for the last 7 years. I'm a proud United States citizen. I actually go to school right now at Pitt. My husband is unemployed. I go to school full-time. I work part-time. And I would not be able to go to school without any funding from the government. I got Pell Grants, I got a few loans, which made it possible for me to afford education. I need to finish my education in order to start working and pay my taxes and be able to uphold our economy. But I am not being able to do that if they're gonna cut the education funding. This is not right. People all over the globe are better than us in terms of education, and we're lagging behind. This never used to be true. We used to be ahead. We used to be ahead of everybody in this world, and now we're lagging behind. That is not right. We need education reform. We need it now. We don't need to cut education. We need to invest in it.
Okay, hello, my name is Sharon DiCarlo. I work as a banquet waitress. In these tough economic times, I've been struggling to keep a roof over my head. I've been forced to borrow from my 401k and my life insurance policy just to make my mortgage payments. I consider myself lucky because at least I have those to borrow from. Being in the service industry, I've seen many of my fellow workers struggling too. And now Republicans and corporations are working to take away health care funding. Greedy corporations and Republicans with whom have health insurance are trying to stop the hardworking people with whom they cannot prosper from having affordable health insurance. To me, this doesn't make sense. Without health insurance, an easily treatable illness can become an expensive, life-threatening illness costing all American taxpayers millions of dollars. We, the working class of America, have built this country with our sweat and blood. And now that greedy corporations have caused the worst depression since the Great Depression, we, the workers, are expected to accept cuts that affect our very lives. The education of our children will determine the future finances in America. This cut now, pay later attitude is like putting a Band-Aid on a severed limb. We, the workers, are America's financial future. Don't let us down.
Thank you. I wanted to share a note I got from Ed M. I don't know where Ed's from, but he said, please make sure to call Representative Murphy out for his support of tax breaks for the wealthy, which have led to many of these cuts to vital programs. Also, Murphy openly supports cutting Social Security and Medicare. That's what Ed says. Also, as a medical professional, he should be ashamed to support cutting programs that actually benefit people's well-being. I just wanted to share something that is in the continuing resolution. There are cuts to mental health services, and the House bill slashes $200 million from Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Research, it cuts $68 million from research on mental illness at the National Institute of Mental Health. It cuts $557 million from special education funding. And finally, it reduces housing and urban development Section 811 programs that provide supportive housing for persons with disabilities from $300 million in 2010 to $90 million in the upcoming year. So that's a big cut.
Hi, I'm Joe Post. I'm from Oakdale, Pennsylvania, and my concern is the drastic cuts that this bill put into place against the EPA regarding the regulation for coal ash or fly ash. It's that the EPA was right on the verge of declaring the substance toxic, the toxic substance that it is, and this will it's going to endanger our health. My sign is actually not strong enough, doesn't just make you sick, it kills you. Because right now there are 3 sites, 3 of these waste coal sites in the Pennsylvania alone that are leaking that hexavalent chromium into the water. It's going to poison our water and our air. And not far from here, the Beach Hollow power plant that's proposed right now was just resurrected after a long protest about a year ago, and he's resurrected his request for a permit for that, and it's going to be the largest toxic dump in the whole United States if he gets that power plant in. It's called the Beach Hollow Waste Coal Power Plant, and we as citizens are all going to suffer because the whole Pittsburgh area is going to be adversely affected by the poisons that this is going to dump into our water. So I'm very disappointed in Representative Murphy's vote to cut these EPA funds to not regulate the coal ash, and I hope that when this Amendment 217 comes back to his office that he will oppose it next time and look out for the health of his constituents.
High-speed rail eliminated.
Boo!
Cuts to scientific innovation.
Boo!
Cuts to clean energy programs.
Boo!
Deep cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency.
Boo!
Cuts to federal heating assistance when we need it most.
Boo!
$760 million from WIC, providing support to pregnant women and their children.
Boo!
$750 million from rural development programs affecting Republican constituents.
Boo!
AmeriCorps eliminated.
Boo!
Office of Science cut by 20%.
These cuts are ridiculous, and their purpose is not to balance the budget. Their purpose is to destroy things like the EPA, public education, Head Start, social services that are so beneficial to so many Americans. And I'm ashamed that we have people in this country who are so self-serving and so greedy that they don't look to the long term to solve our problems. They look to a short-term agenda that has nothing really to do with balancing the budget.
I'm really sorry that the federal government has decided to cut all human services. I'm sorry that they should start cutting their own salaries, their own benefits, and then go after the weakest and the poorest of all of us. We need to stand up.
Hi, my name is Frank Harris, and my son is autistic, and I don't want to see any funding cut for the people that need it the most. Too long this country's gone on cutting for corporations and rich guys. We saw in Wisconsin how billionaire gets right through to the governor, and I'd like people to do things fairly from now on. I think it's time for a change. We've seen in the Middle East that people standing up for democracy can really work. I think a few people in the streets in the United States isn't going to hurt matters much. Let's get out there and exercise democracy.
Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm, short-term cuts. Long-term harm.
Short-term cuts. Long-term harm.